with Le-an Lacaba. I can give you a quick little background. I have it here. Um, Dynamic force in the world of entrepreneurship and literature, best known as CEO and co-founder of Two Times You. Is that how you say it? Two Times You?
2XU.
2XU, okay. A company revolutionizing remote executive assistance, starting your work from home journey at the tender age of 18 or 15, and then publishing your book by 18, and then CEO by 20. It's a pretty impressive short amount of time. And then your books kind of delve into the complexities of love and human connection, if I'm not mistaken.
That
Like,
yeah, that was 18-year-old Leann. Yeah.
Interesting? Okay, because I was gonna say, how do you have time for that? But that makes more sense now. You're like, I did have time.
Yeah, I was a kid. So.
Yeah. Do you want to start just like career and what inspired your work? Because it seems like not everybody jumps into this profession.
So for me, so I've always been a writer. I found out that I wanted to be a writer when I was like 10 or 11, because I found out it was so easy for me to put into words, and like everyone else, like I would be the only one in English class excited whenever the teacher wanted us to do an essay. Everyone else
Same.
hated it and groaned. I was like, oh yay! I was that kid basically. So then the wonderful world of internet kind of came along, and there was all the way to Blogspot. Basically, like WordPress didn't even exist yet as a blogging platform. Um, I started creating content. I started creating articles, also writing like love stories of other people or things that pop up in my head. And I started getting people who were viewing it because, of course, there's nothing else to view as well. And one of them said, like, "Hey, I'm actually looking for a ghostwriter, and the style of writing that you're doing is very similar to what I need." So that's kind of the first ever freelance writing job that I got at 15 years old, because of course no one was checking my resume, no one was really checking like how old I was. And I started getting payments from it. I would use it to buy books because I couldn't really move money from the US to the Philippines just yet. That was kind of that's 2011.
It's kind of interesting you said
Mm,
style, because they weren't looking for like a professional, that they noticed something unique about your writing to begin with.
I guess so.
Can can you go like backwards a little bit and talk about like how do you even discover your writing, or like what are you using as a child that's helping you develop is a better question.
So I was part of our journalism club. I think that's what shaped a lot of my writing. I was a feature writer in a journalism club in high school, and one of the things that we were taught was basically kind of what's that famous writing site? For some reason, it's skipping my brain, but it's
Like a Spark Notes
basically
kind of thing.
it's listicles basically. Like I loved writing list articles. That's
Hmm.
that's still the kind of writing that I do until this day even. Um, just because I like for me, I'm the older sister, so I'm always used to breaking things down for my siblings, so then they understand how things work. So that's how I think. So that's how I write. So I think that was kind of part of it, because then I started writing a lot of list articles for that person. Once I started getting onboarded with them, and since then that's kind of been the kind of writing I've done for other people, and now for my own business I do the same thing. So that's kind of the style.
Do you felt like, I mean, being creative is not a super easy industry. So what kind of like roadblocks have you been up against? Have you ever felt competitive, or have you always just, made your own lane and it's been easy for you?
I've done both, where I will see someone in my niche do really really well, and I'll try to find a creative way to, well, not outdo them, but do it my way. Like I'll see like a content of like, oh, that worked. I'm like, okay, how can I make that work for me? So it's kind of that, it's combo of both, of like competition, because like I know that works, that audiences, people want this, and I know
Mhm.
also the combo of how can I make it my own.
What is something that you would consider like consistent across human nature and all platforms? Because I understand you're in the Philippines, if I'm not
Hmm.
mistaken.
Yep.
So, I mean,
Hmm.
obviously, audience interactions may be a little different. So maybe you can talk about the nuances.
Um, I see, because like for example, not just on my writing now, I also do, I've been doing video on YouTube for the last 4 or 5 years now. The major thing that I see is for more for the Philippine audience, and a little bit there's a funny overlap with my Indian and my uh a little bit of my African audiences as well, is they will ask for the more broken down basics. Um, and for the more Western, they ask for more the higher point of view. So I've seen that back and forth. So that's why for my content, for whenever it's geared towards like, hey, this is how you get started working online. It's very much like, okay, step by step, this is how you do it. And when I talk about this is how you start a business online, then I switch up and like, okay, these are the concepts you need to understand. So it's that's kind of the main two things that I've seen over and over again with the audience and the questions that they ask or the content that they request.
I definitely feel like, because I watched a few of your videos and I was like, damn,
Thank
she's
you.
so authentic doing shit that I wouldn't do. Like, it's just the carefree aspect of creating content that I overthink everything, right? And that's super natural. Like I'm sure everybody does it, but that's also why you're probably successful. You know what I mean? So can you talk about those things? Like why we get in our head, or maybe like what lets you get out of that aspect of overthinking?
Um, I always joke about this. There's a clip somewhere in our archives when before even I started this company, I was still in another company, but I wanted to go into content creation where my business partner literally shoved me in front of a camera because I'm naturally an introvert. I naturally will read a book, be in my dark room the whole day. Like I had a
Same.
friend come over and it was just dark and like, oh, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, just reading my book the last 4 hours. Um, that's like my
Wow.
natural state. So for
Yeah.
me, in my head, I created this persona of like there's a Leann who loves speaking, who loves being in front of people, and it's kind of a click in my head. So I slowly developed that Leann in the last like 4 to 5 years. So then I don't have to always overthink. At least video, like video, I don't overthink. Writing, I still do. I'm very protective of my writing. So I would write something, just a rant on Facebook, and I would delete all of it and never post it. So I still have weird kinks in my head just because the video Leanne persona I've developed so well, but writing is still that 11-year-old Leanne who's scared of like what people would think.
Interesting. I'm like, does AI help with that at all, or not really? Maybe just parsing and pulling out the thoughts in some kind of way.
I've used because I use AI a lot. The main thing that I use it for when I'm writing, like creating content for myself, not for my business or not for anything else. I use it for the first line, just because when it comes to the first line, I would in my head like I'd hear like, oh, this would be a really good first line, and I would not be sure about it, so I'd workshop it a little bit with using AI, and then I'll write the rest. That's kind of how
It's
I've used
really
it.
good for brainstorming, right? I think
Yeah,
it's,
yeah.
yeah, very, very underrated. You talked about reading a little bit. Are you still kind of in fantasy land, or like what are you educating or like trying to learn about these days?
So I'm,
I
I'm a
say
little bit of both.
fantasy because love and romance, or no,
Yeah.
the novels.
Well, I it's funny because I have a system. So I have my Kindle for fiction books, and I have my mini iPad for nonfiction books. So I still kind of I do balance both, and I do have like I'm looking around. I have like a bajillion books around me. But I still, of course, when I'm traveling, I'd rather just use my devices rather than bringing a whole thick book.
Yeah,
Right now, when I'm studying, I'm reading the book Flow. This is a we have a book club within my company where every single month I assign people things. That means I'm assigning myself a book to read.
that's
So I'm reading the book.
smart.
Yeah. So it's
I like
a
that.
little hack. It's a
I
accountability hack a little bit.
talk
Yeah.
about that a little bit. Go in on that a little bit. Has it been working? Like,
Mm.
what is that like?
It's been fun because like for like every single Friday, basically with my team, I give them a like, hey, based on like this, we agree we're gonna read this many chapters this week. Based on what you guys have read so far, this is the prompt, and then they go into breakout rooms on Zoom. They have fun because then they're discussing, they're meeting people that normally they wouldn't be interacting with at all in the company. So I think that's the part that's fun for me, at least, is seeing them like, oh, I didn't know John would do this thing to get into flow, at least with the book that we're reading right now. So it's been
Yeah,
fun.
what is that about? Is it like company kind of training, building, career building? What is the
Um,
book about?
Flow itself is I think I have the physical book somewhere, but I've been reading it off of my iPad. It's more of like how you can get into flow, like how you can block everything off, and how to find how
Mm,
you get into flow, understanding how to get into deep work. Basically, it's kind of like a you read flow and then you read deep work. I think that's kind of in my head how you can read those.
do you find that it's mainly reconfirming things you already knew in a way?
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of it, yeah.
Wow.
Just because I read a lot
Okay.
also.
So give some tips to the listeners, because I think creatives may like have creative block way more than you think.
Mm.
So how do you get into flow state?
Well, for me, I have different quote unquote tricks that I do for myself if I want to get into flow. One, so I'm currently writing a nonfiction book this time, and one thing that I did, and this was before I moved, and since then it's been chaotic, so I've been able to do it. Is I have just a habit of like every time I wake up, I do a little bit of morning routine, do my one thing in the morning, whatever that task is from my assistant. She usually tells me what to do, and then I go out and I have this one spot in one coffee shop that I do every single time. And I only have my iPad. It's not connected to the internet. And then I write. That's kind of how, and then I actually have a timer next to me that's for an hour. It's blocked off on my calendar and I get it done. That's one for the particular book. Other times I will have spur of the moment ideas. And I will just always make sure that on my phone, it's easy for me to access the notes app so that I could just write even just that one sentence that popped in my head. Because I think a lot of the times when we get creative blocks is because we keep denying ourselves whenever we do have that creative juice going. Or we don't create space for that creative juice to start going. We think like, oh, I'm too busy. I can't really do this. There's voice notes. There's sending something to yourself. I have on my one of my messenger apps, I have one that I just send to myself. So then I never forget them. It pops up later on. So I create little nooks and spaces for my creativity to pop in whenever it does.
It's pretty interesting. I definitely relate, especially in terms of like songwriting. You have like some line that comes to your head and you're just like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's clever. I don't want to lose that. I can start something from this one line later. Or even just like an invention or something strange. Like I
Yeah.
do feel like a lot of thoughts are just fleeting constantly. So you're kind of on the boat of document as it comes. Is that a
Yeah.
good way to say it?
Yeah. That's
That's
Gary Vaynerchuk, when I was studying him, that was one of the things he always said is like document, don't create. Because when you create, you're
yeah,
forcing it. Documenting, you're already just like taking things as they are.
that's true. And it's funny because today I was making music and I don't honestly make music very often. Like it's something I super enjoy and I should put more time and passion and effort because I care about it. But it's one of those things, I'm trying to see if you can relate to this, to where you think about needing to do something, it comes to the back of your head and then you just kind of put it off because there's other things more important. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I'll even do that with meditation sometimes, and I'm just like, I thought about it, but I'll do it when I think about it again. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
you just keep
Yep.
putting it off. Some things are more important, things are more important. Do you often do that, and what do you feel like you're neglecting?
I kind of really do or aim to do the opposite of it every single time. And like that comes from me studying manifestation a little bit, also studying religion a little bit, that it feels like whenever you keep rejecting that thought, whenever the genius idea comes up, then it kind of like the next time it comes along and you don't do action still, then it won't come back again. So like in my head, that's why I said that I always have a notes app ready on my phone to be clicked, or voice note to my assistant if it really is something that I have to voice out versus like typing out. Um, so I try as much as possible to write it down versus like letting it float away, because chances are I won't have the same circumstance that made it pop up in my head. So I do try to write it down. I'm a big subscriber as well of the book Getting Things Done. Of just capture it whenever you can. Just write it down, so then there is something to go back to rather than just waiting for the right circumstance for it to pop up again.
I'm kind of stuck between going backwards because I still want to understand childhood interest and
Mhm.
like really what does young you look like, where you're learning or getting books or influenced. What made you get into reading in general, and then maybe you can transition into like what how you knew things were working. You know?
Mhm. So on how I got to reading, so my mom loved to buy the encyclopedia peddling book people who like stop house to house selling like, hey, we
Wow.
have like 10 book encyclopedia on this one. And I regret this, that I never treasured it as much as I now think of it. My mom had the first edition Harry Potter books, the book set of the first 4 books. She bought that.
Wow.
And I read parts of it, and I didn't get into it, sadly, until I was 21. But I remember we had that set for like 10 years. Sadly, our so part of my kind of my story is like I went through a horrific category 5 typhoon where water came into our house. Like I
Oh.
was it was my near death experience that changed everything in my head, where the water came into my house. I was still downstairs. I'm the eldest of 4, so I was making sure we had groceries, making sure we had candles. I had no idea how long it was going to be. So I was carrying groceries on one hand. I was carrying our lamp, our family lamp on one hand. I had a matchbox on my mouth, and water was starting to come in. I made sure that all my siblings were safe, and I had this split second of like, if I die, I'm going to change how I live. And like spit out the matchbook, screamed for my brother to come down because he had no idea the water came in that fast. I gave him everything else and climbed up the railing of our house to get there. But then that
How
also
much
meant that we
water is
sadly
this?
us basically seawater that came from, because our house, and I didn't know because of course it was blocked off by the big fence that our neighbor had. Our house was like a few meters from the water. And that's most places in the Philippines anyway. So the waters just started sweeping in really fast, and it already knocked down. That's why the water came in fast, because it knocked down that big fence of our neighbor. So then it was just the street and then us.
Rushing.
So that, yeah.
Whoa. That is intense. So were you just huddled upstairs or something? Where'd you go? Like,
Yeah, we were lucky enough to have a second floor. There were people who did not have a second floor, did not even really have a strong enough house to withstand it. We lost a lot of really good, at least my mom's friends. My mom lost a lot of really good friends as well. But that also meant that Harry Potter book that mom also got swept away by the water and destroyed. Yeah.
What do you remember though? Like about just that experience, like, being huddled up there and stuff. What did y'all talk about? Or
It's a very vivid memory in my head. It's been 10 years, like solidly. It was 2013. We basically, it was my siblings, my grandmother, and a special basically an aunt of mine who had special needs. And we just huddled and prayed because my grandma was very Catholic, very religious. And being the eldest granddaughter, I knew all of the 4 mysteries of the rosary. So we were just repeating that because we were all like, all we hear was like wind. Like it would sound like basically an airplane about to take off, but like for 2-3 hours straight. That was all that we heard. We would hear our neighbors, and we couldn't do anything because we were also on the top floor. We would hear our neighbors screaming for help, and like we saw some of them like climb their roofs. I'm like, okay, they're kind of okay there. And it lasted 5 hours, 4 hours. Like it started. Remember it came up like at 7 o'clock. That was when the water was already in, and everything kind of started going down at 11. So we were there for hours, not even knowing what the heck was going on, what it would look like. There were an estimated 20,000 people dead. There was 6 months to a year later, we would still find bodies of people who just got swept into houses or into like grassland or anything like that. But like I said, it was that turning moment for me that I took so many risks after that, including quitting college. So that was kind of the pivot point of Leann's
little detail.
Well, I was very much this straight and narrow Asian kid of like, okay, I'm honor student. I went to a prestigious. I got into like the college that doesn't let anyone in. I was that straight and narrow, and then that's like, no, I want to write. I want to live a story that I can write about. So then, from then on, that's kind of when I pivoted, dropped out of college. My mom was so mad at me for the next 3 years. Blocked me on Facebook even for a while there. Because I dropped out. Like again, I was the putting, the parents put expectations like it. I was
dishonor.
Open. Yeah, exactly. It was very much the dishonor on everything.
Wow. Very Asian.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, but I did want to pave a path. And I on that funny turn of things, and sadly when my mom passed about 3 years ago now, when we were in her hospital bed, she was holding me, and we just gotten news that she had stage 4 colon cancer. She said, Leann, I'm proud of you. And like, I'm like, what? This is 6 a.m. Where's this? And like, what's happening? And she's like, you fought
Damn.
against me and you won. You've built a business for yourself. You've been, at that point, I was like doing speaking gigs. I was like doing courses. I was already starting out. 2XU was already been like a year and a half at that point. And she said the words that every Asian kid wants to hear, like, I'm proud of you. You fought against me and you won, and like, I'll always carry that forever and ever and ever. Like, I'll tell it to my kids of like, my mom was proud of me, kind of thing. Because, and it all started from me, kind of that typhoon pivoting me and then changing my path.
Damn, that's a super huge detail.
Yeah.
That's a really good story. But what is your first experience like where you're like, damn, I'm doing something crazy or something's taking off? What was that like?
I've had a few of those feelings a couple of times. So the 15 got writing gigs, also got video editing gigs, graphic artist gigs, basically anything that I could swallow. And I started getting like magazines who wanted to work with me. So that was kind of the first, like, oh, this is something I can do. The next was when after the typhoon, I basically finished off my third year of college. That was 6 months. I moved to the city that I'm here now because there's really typhoons here. I basically ran away to the least typhoon-y city. And then I started a career working with a startup company, a book publishing company. They were like 2 years when I joined. And I, because I'm a big bookworm, it was a dream for me to be paid to read books. And I steadily rose up in that company, became CEO of it. That's why I became CEO at 20, because I kept grinding. I kept like, finding books that I love. And like, I love working with this author. So that's also the other thing that got me like, I'm good at that. I'm actually good at talking to people or getting them to give me the book that they've been working for the last 3 years on to a publisher that they've never heard of. So that kind of was another pivot thing. And then when I was 23, I got the publishing company to the point where I could take 2 months off, and I actually tested it, and the company would run fine. So I was like, oh wait, okay, so now I'm ready for the next thing. I want to start another company. 2XU came around because the course we were creating was how to hire a virtual assistant, and basically I jokingly called it how not to be a jerk boss one-on-one remotely because we taught them concept like this is how you give feedback, this is how you find out if they're a good match, this is how you grow your employee, not just hiring them, but this is how they want to have the loyalty towards you. And then we had from the course, we got invited to do a lot of speaking gigs because people had no idea what a virtual assistant was. We got to like different stages. We're speaking in Malaysia and Singapore. And then in Singapore stage, I met someone who's like, I love what you guys teach. I don't want to do it. Can you guys do it for us? So then that was like the next ding moment in our heads of like, we can make an agency out of this. And then that's kind of how we started in October 2019, the whole thing. So I've been lucky enough that it's been a flow of one or the other. I'm also not discounting all of the mental breakdowns that I've had in between all of that. But I know that all of that kind of led me to where I am.
Yeah, it sounded like everything compounded, and like it's one of those things. Here's another example that I find a commonality when I interview people is they're doing things that they don't know what's going to lead to what.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're discovering your passion in the process.
Yep.
So it's one of those things where how are people supposed to know what they like if they don't get out there, in a sense, right? Like how are you supposed to find what you're good at, what people need, what you can provide? I just feel like that was a really good example of that.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. You never know.
Pardon this 15-second interruption, but if you want to make your own podcast, consider checking out Riverside, the same thing that I'm using to make this show right now. Super user-friendly. Descriptions in the link below. Back to the show.
So how did the concept actually come about in terms of like the name of it, and then what were like the biggest challenges just getting off the ground?
So for getting it started, so we had the course. So we basically built everything from the course. So 2XU was already kind of the name for the course. The funny thing is that was the only thing available on GoDaddy. We had like 15 business names that we had, and we kept finding the website whichever one was available on GoDaddy. And 2XU was, and we're like, okay, that one. Let's stick to that one. 2XU will build your second brain. Blah blah blah. We're 2Xing you in your business. So it started from that. And then when we started the agency part of it, now after the course, once we had that first client, then I built everything around that. I'm like, okay, this is what we said the recruitment process was, that this is now our recruitment process. This is how we'll train the EAs, even if they had minor experience in being an executive assistant. This is how we'll train them up to. But at the same time, we're also going to train the clients themselves. So like, okay, this is how you give feedback. This is how you grow your assistant. This is, your assistant is not supposed to be someone who just gets things done. They get things done with you. So we've had different concepts and different systems that we put in place. Last year, we launched a new project that we call the 2XU BOS, which is the business operating systems. So it's a list of 74 assets. Came out of it completely out of my brain. I had no idea where it came from, but it became a thing where it's like, whenever you're a startup or you've been a solopreneur for so long, your assets are everywhere. So a lot of what we train our EAs on is like, here's a list of 75 assets that your client probably needs, or they already have. Let's start collecting them. And if they don't have this is how you develop and you create it. So we've built this kind of big, I had this big, hairy, audacious goal, and I aimed for it to happen. And I now have we now have that, the BOS checklist, basically, that has kind of changed a lot of our clients' businesses as well.
Interesting. I'm kind of wondering, like, just like keep going deeper into that, because what are the effects of it, and then in general, like, are there different clients? Like, for example, have you worked with like American companies that you feel are way different or anything? Like, how are foreign clients as opposed to like hometown and whatnot?
So from day one,
Expectations.
True. Well, from day one, we've always been working with foreign companies. Like, most of our clients are from Australia, from Dubai, UK, and the US. At one point, it was more than 50% was from the US, but it's Australia kind of balanced that out a little bit. So for the differences between working the two, it's a little bit harder to say, I guess, because clients coming from Dubai, chances are they came from Canada, or they came from the UK as well. So the culture doesn't really change or shift there. I guess kind of the same thing that I said earlier about like the differences between the two audiences that I do have is like, for if I'm working for more primarily Asian culture, like they want the step-by-step breakdown. For more of the Western culture, they want more of the higher concepts. So like, okay, this is what we'll create without needing to know all of the details, versus for the Asian culture, I go through the details first and then the bigger concept. I guess that's still how I shift and change how I talk about 2XU to a lot of people. Plus now with us evolving into, we're saying 2XU is an AI empowered executive assistant agency, and it is. A lot of our EAs are learning how to use generative AI. We're now going to start teaching them how to use automations. It's a big thing, but at the same time, like, when each time we're upgrading something, our EAs get the benefit of learning something versus like having to do it on their own. And of course, for our clients, they're already getting the benefit of their EAs learning how to use a tool that they might be skeptical and they don't want to learn it themselves. So it's kind of a really nice double win-win situation, basically, for both sides.
I'm curious if like the people that are working with you are also doing like adventurous outside things because of their new abilities that they're getting, or if they're just getting real creative with it. And then if you can talk about just like your idea of 10,000 entrepreneurs, your audacious goal.
My big audacious goal. On other employees have gone away further with it. I was literally just on a call like 30 minutes before we started with one of our employees who became a friend of mine because he left and is now working in Canada, and he showed me this really cool concept, and we came up with a name for it earlier, where we're calling it the persona framework, where based off of what I've taught him, what he's learned, what he's been doing with AI, he created this whole amazing freaking mind map of like, okay, this is a business I want to start in Canada. I'm like, okay, let me help you how to make this. They've done that. Like, we've had different employees come through, not just in 2XU, but like I work with two other companies as well who've done that. If their life changes, like we've had moms who left because they wanted more time with their kids. They wanted more of a part-time work, and then they started their own business on the side. So we've had different people who've done that, and also some who are kind of doing it with us. Like we have EAs who are entrepreneurs, who are doing things on the side, who are taking again what we're teaching them and applying it to their own lives. So it's been a good again win-win as well on that end. And then for the goal of helping 10,000 entrepreneurs, it originally really came from my goal of helping 1 million Filipinos work from home. So for me, the reason why for the Typhoon, it was really just me, my siblings, my grandma, and my aunt, was because my dad, for most of my life, worked overseas, because I was the only way in the Philippines at that time that you can earn really good money. So for the first 20 years of my life, because my dad now has retired, my dad I would only see him like once or twice a year. So I had this passion, this burning goal of like, okay, I want to give parents the choice to be able to work from home, to be there for their kids rather than going away for months and months at a time, and not even like being actually there. So it started from that goal. And then I was like, okay, how can I get 1 million Filipinos employed working from home? I want to help then 10,000 entrepreneurs build their business. So then they learn how to grow a business and take care of the employees at the same time and not have to choose one or the other. So that's kind of where they kind of are like, that's why 2XU's logo is like two hands holding, because it goes literally hand in hand, one goal helping the other.
Interesting. I like it. The idea of content creation monster, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think is that your quote specifically? I'm just curious how you managed to like upload across all platforms and just like how so much work at once. It must take a lot of effort, no? And then also your thoughts on media in general, because do you feel like, I know other people have said this, that it's going to be way more valuable in the future in general if people just start creating content now, like for their livelihoods?
For the content monster, so since I'm naturally creative, it was so easy for me to I say so easy, you kind of understand the concept that I say when I say it's so easy. It was kind of a natural thing for me instead of easy. It was a natural thing for me to start creating a ton of content. Once I was, like I said, I was studying Gary Vaynerchuk, I was studying all of these other people who are already creating content for their business, to go into it. So but nowadays, honestly, I spend this hour on a podcast, I spend like an hour creating 2 videos a week, and that's mostly it. Like the rest, luckily, because I have an amazing team that I do have now, working everywhere else. So I have a video editor who then cuts the big video into smaller pieces of content for Reels, TikTok, and then YouTube Shorts. My assistant creates graphics basically and has learned how to write as me, which is funny. And now uses AI to be able to write a little bit better than me. Then that goes into like a carousel for Instagram, for Facebook, for LinkedIn. And then for content like this, for the podcast or whenever I'm doing speaking gigs, it's the same thing. Like they break down this really big piece of content and then make it into smaller bits and pieces. So on the content monster, I built the original concept and I did the original concept. Like when I was building it out, it was just me. I was editing my own videos. I was creating my own blog posts and I built all of it. And now I've delegated and passed it on to someone else. But it's something that I like to do for fun. And I like seeing and working with other people who also have found it fun to create content as well, of playing with the numbers. Like our current social media manager, he was like the other day, like, I want to test it out. I'm like, sure, go ahead and test it out. And it worked. I'm like, oh, see, you have nothing to fear. Just keep testing and finding like what works. Yeah. So for the future of media, I think the world, and I remember the world where no one cared about, when I was still running the publishing company, I remember the world where no one cared about the publisher, they cared about the author. So a lot of the marketing concepts that we had with the publishing company was more about marketing the author. Now more and more, it's the book publishing companies that people follow. Like people follow, like for me, I follow, forget the smaller version of it, like the imprint of one of the bigger publishing companies. I follow their TikTok because it's already really fun, and I constantly keep getting it book recommendations that I would have never heard of if I just followed the author. So it's more of people want to hear from behind the scenes, not just from behind the scenes, from the people who actually create things, from getting stories of how it works, of how it's done. Yesterday I was at a conference where they were talking about like, oh, this is how, since it's Women's Month, less than 80% of women know that they can actually get funding basically, or investments. And I spoke up. I'm like, it's because no one talks about it, and you guys have to start talking about it, so then we get informed. So it's the same thing with every single thing, is that if you are in a very niche thing and you're like, oh, no one will get my content, I'm very niche part, that's how people will start getting your content, is if you start talking about it, if you start being open to it.
It's so true. And it can start with something so small. I'm trying to do a parallel to music where I was following a bunch of producers. Like, obviously, I'm not putting out music like that, but that's my interest. And I want to post things about it. So we already have things in common, right? And I also felt like, so I ran a social experiment. You might even be interested in it. And it was basically trying to prove if Twitter monetization was worth the cost or not. And what I learned was that it was only useful if you had a large audience and you're posting a long form content video. That was the only way. Yeah, that's what I basically learned. Otherwise, YouTube was basically where it's at. But in the process of what I do, it was basically being funny. I would go and interact with people's tweets, try to provide value, just making people laugh, and then following them and then getting a refollow. And over time, I've authentically not just follow for followed, but I've grown to know these people too. And it's real interesting how we're talking about just getting involved in the niche that you're,
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of other ways that you can relate that for like content creators. Like, how do they find more people and learn more in their own niche? What do you advise?
Just follow people in your own niche. Is kind of the easiest way. Like, the other thing that I know a lot of people think about when it comes to going into content creation is the competition of it all. But to be honest, like, you have your own story, like you have your own way of thinking that you can bring into the platform. And I remember a couple of times, for me, when I was starting out on TikTok and I was starting to get viral for a couple of times, I had this, I came across, or someone sent it actually to me. Someone sent it to my Facebook page of like, oh, this person's bashing you. And I was looking at their video of like, they were saying, oh, someone on this app is claiming that they started working from home at 15 years old. What do you mean 15 years old? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, they don't know my story. So like, for me, I couldn't ever be defensive of that. But then when I looked at their page, they were also creating literally the same kind of content I was creating. They were creating content on how to start working from home, how to do this. And I'm like, why feel the need to tear someone down where I have my story of how I got started? Just because that wasn't your story doesn't mean that you're invalidating mine. So it's that you have to first eliminate that kind of thinking when you are going to content creation. And the other side of it is kind of the concept that I still believe to this day is just document, don't create. Like, document the life that you have, your experience. That's what people are looking for. That's what the stories of, I literally, right before this, I was watching a funny TikTok of someone telling their story of like how they've been cheating on their husband's husband, only to find out that the person they were cheating on was their brother, the brother of the husband. And like, it was this whole long thing, and finding out that the husband actually has a whole other wife because the brother's nonchalantly said, oh yeah, no, my brother has a whole like family in Germany. And she's like, what? So like, people, and I watched that while I was doing my makeup before this. And people, like, you can see the comments, you can see the views, you can see people saving it. People want stories from other people, and it's never going to be really enough just because TikTok has created this platform, not just TikTok, Reels, YouTube Shorts, where you can keep scrolling through it and it feels like an infinite amount of content. So that's what I mean by it's never going to be really polluted, or it's never going to be congested. There's no need to feel like you're in competition with other people, just because people want stories. People want to hear how you're living.
I also feel like that relates the making fun of someone at 15. It's the whole quote, like, just because someone can't, they assume that you also can't do something. I find that very common about people. Like, wish it was a quote. I've been saying it though more and more, but I don't. It's not an actual quote.
You can make it a quote. Put it up on a Canva right now and post it on Twitter.
Right, that's not a bad idea. How do you think AI challenges like traditional philosophical notions, whether it's like consciousness or intelligence, however deep you want to answer that question?
So I started creating content on AI literally within 2 weeks of ChatGPT coming out. And and I've always said this, I said this before, and I keep saying it to other people, of like, AI is supposed to be a multiplier. That's why it's based off of what's already on the internet, because it's supposed to multiply that. So when it comes to consciousness, deep thinking, it's supposed to be your tool. It's not supposed, again, same thing. It's not supposed to be your competition. It's supposed to be your tool to multiply what you already have. That's why you have people who are doing really bad things with AI, because again, AI is not the bad guy. It's this person using AI in a bad way. So, and it's the same
That's
thing with
funny.
like, yeah, and you see
It's a
it like
good way, it's a good way to put it.
yeah, because people are like, oh, villainizing AI. AI will destroy this. AI doesn't have
Well,
copyright.
you're making
blah,
me
blah, blah.
think. Now you're making me think. Whenever people are questioning me, I'm like, are you questioning my character, the person behind the AI? Like, what are you afraid of? You know?
Yeah. So it's else goes back to therapy now. We could
Oh my gosh.
uh,
That's a
again,
good.
it's like anything else in the world. Like you could have the best like prime laptop. If you have no idea how to use it, it's gonna be a basic processor. And the same thing if you have the most basic laptop, but you have this high level of skill, you're going to make that the best tool ever. So it really depends on how you use it to multiply yourself, or as an extension of yourself, and how you use it for other people as well.
Do you have any predictions on like implications or future things you see being disrupted, like quickly, ASAP, or something? What do you
Well,
see
content
coming?
creation already is. That's kind of the first thing. I know the other
For
day
sure.
TikTok released a way where you could ask it to give you content ideas based on what's trending, and I was like, whoa.
Interesting.
So it's already disrupted content creations, made it a little bit easier, to be honest, for a lot of people, depending on how you look at it. Other things that will be disrupted by basically anything that's repetitive, to be honest. Like for me, as someone who runs a virtual assistant agency, that was kind of the first fear of like, oh, this can replace VAs. But in my head, you still need someone who's good enough to run this. You still like same thing with copywriting. People are like, oh, AI is ruining copywriting, but you still need a really good copywriter to know that it's actually a good copy to put it out onto the world. So I think that's how I see it, is like AI can quote unquote replace a lot of the repetitive tasks, but you still need the person who's skilled enough to know, hey, that's wrong, or like, hey, this is amazing.
I think it's important that you said tasks, because even I saw an interview recently with Sam Altman, and he basically said that he'd be curious to know exactly which tasks are going to be replacing with AI, right? Like not jobs, specifically what tasks that are 10, 5, 15 minutes, however long, but just like you're saying, the repetitive stuff that you can just get rid of the monotony of a lot of things. It's very interesting.
Yep. I have I released it's still out there on I just don't market it as much because it is a lot. It's 500 plus prompts that virtual assistants can use to replace them in tasks. So how to replace yourself in writing email, how to replace yourself in creating a calendar invite description, how to replace yourself in creating a social media calendar. So I do have that list. Just because like I nerded out about it and like put my head down and learned everything that I could replace myself with using ChatGPT.
Are you like hard stance on anything when it comes to the creative aspect, whether it's art or music or your image and likeness? What are your thoughts on all that?
I think my biggest one is if you start using someone else's words and you don't credit them, that's the only line, at least for now, that I do have in my head. Like I put it all the time of like, write this in the voice of I don't know. I'm right now into Alex Ramosi. Write this in the voice of Alex Ramosi, and then of course I will write it like exactly like from his videos, from his other content that's on there. But if you paste that as is, if you use that as is, that's kind of my line. At least edit it. Always treat. I guess this is my stance. Always treat AI as a first draft, and people always forget that. Like AI content that you produce should always just be a first draft. You have to add your humanness to it. That way you are still developing and working on yourself rather than making AI think for you.
That's a super good point. And I think people actually belittle the technology by thinking if you use it, that it's just this crutch.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, hey, you don't know how much time I spent refining this to make it look this good, you know?
Yeah.
That's interesting. double-edged sword, because another thing I often face is the pushback on ideas, just to come to the conclusion, let's go with that, like weeks later. And it's like, so we're supposed to be speeding things up, and it often people are still skeptical about using it. It's kind of interesting, the dilemma right now that we're in the middle of acceptance, still not accepting it. In what ways do you think it's going to just challenge like existing social or economic or any political structures? Are you worried about any of that?
Pardon this 15-second interruption, but have you ever considered video editing? Check out Movavi. It's super user-friendly. You might be surprised by what you can learn so easily. Consider it. It's what I use. Check out the link in the description below. Let's get back to the show.
I was at a conference. I was speaking. I was with a panel with like 7 other people, and we were talking about AI. And there was this one guy who was asked that question of like, what, like, how do you see that? And he gave this really good answer that now we're friends. That's actually that was the tipping point. That I was like, yeah, friends with that guy. We have been friends. We're now collaborating on different things. But he said, break it. Make people break it. Make people see what the limits of AI is, because right now we don't know, and that's the thing that everyone is scared about, because we don't know. So if we get to the point where we break AI to the point of like what is okay and what is not, we can keep putting in lines, we can keep putting in like the borders of it, of like, okay, this is where we stand, but then it can actually go beyond that. I am echoing my friends. His name is Chris. I'm echoing Chris's voice of let them break them. Let them break how AI is supposed to work. So then we know the limits. Then we could probably put in lines.
Gosh, I would almost argue though that Google's starting with a broken product, because look at how all the bias has been implemented from the beginning. If you've seen the recent, things that have come to light. That's a good point though. And it's like it's kind of what they get for being so far ahead in a way.
Well, it's funny because people are doing that. Like I use Google Gemini back and forth with ChatGPT all the time. If people remember, Midjourney had that same problem. Like when Midjourney came out, they had the same racism, this bias problem, and then they fixed it. Same thing Google's gonna go through. They'll fix it. That's what I mean by break it and then go back to fix it.
For sure. I guess I'm just worried about the dissemination of the knowledge, It's going to be so much easier to control things, I'm sure.
Yeah. But that's the only thing. Yeah.
That's a good point. How can we ensure that its benefits are distributed equally? Because I've been thinking about this a lot, like how it's going to be implemented into everyone's workplace. Do you have any like thoughts on it maybe being used like inequitably, like for not good purposes?
Oh yeah, it always has been. Like we've had deep fakes and people getting phone calls from like family members, and like it's the family member's voice and like all of that. Again, it's going to depend on who uses it. It depends on the kind of person that you actually are getting a hold of an AI. Same thing of the kind of person that you are. If you get like a really good MacBook Pro, what are you gonna do with it? So it's that same thought of, it goes on to the kind of person that you are, and the kind of person people that you also surround yourself with, that you let yourself be influenced by those kind of people as well.
It's so crazy because I definitely had to have a talk with my mom, like, hey, if you ever get these kind of calls, just know.
We have a safe word with my family of like, if you get this call, make sure that you ask this.
Right, or even your workplace, and that's pretty common for corporations now, I guess. You'll see signs like that where it's like, this will never do this. Don't fall for this, we'll never do this. So how does AI challenge our understanding of what it means to be intelligent now?
That's a really good question, and I've never thought of it that way. Because you can, and I've encouraging people to do it, where you can learn anything with AI nowadays. You can ask it to break down a concept. You can ask it to check
anything you want, specifically anything you care about.
That's a really good question. It's making me think about, because primarily I also think about like what it comes to school. like as a student nowadays, there's of course the things coming out where teachers are checking if they're using ChatGPT or
Mhm.
not. They're doing the one that I saw was really clever, was the teacher would put in white font basically, so then it's not seen. So if a kid literally copy and paste their the homework into ChatGPT, the teacher will know if they use ChatGPT or not.
Wow.
I think our definition of knowledge will shift. I think that's the biggest one. Is like, and it's the same thing. I think when we shifted to being able to write books, it's like we don't have to hold things in our head. We don't have to anymore do the verbal history passing from one grandmother to the mother to the grandchild, that kind of thing. We will have to redefine how we measure intelligence, how we measure people storing things in their head, or how measure how we learn. I think that'll be the shift, is redefining how it looks like.
And I feel like, in a sense, you made me think like our lineages can all be digital. Like you can probably see everyone's lives,
Mm-hmm.
family trees, if you really cared.
Yep.
But yeah, it made me think like, is intelligence solely human, or can it be surpassed if it's
If it
artificial? Does it
delegated,
matter?
yeah.
That's interesting. What do you think about like the study of AI, like contributing to our understanding, human cognition, the workings of the mind? You saw Neuralink recently, how they had their first. That's crazy. Like, I don't care what anybody says about Elon. That is crazy for like humanity. What?
It's closer and closer to that Wally picture of like everyone's on chairs, everything's hooked up on that screen, and
Oh my
it knows where you want to do, where you want to go. Again, we'll never know the limits until we get there. We have different concepts of how we want the world to look like. But we'll never know the limits until we keep testing it, until Elon breaks every single thing about AI, or Sam Altman makes another thing that makes everyone mad or enraged just because they never thought that AI could do that. So it's going to be a constant test back and forth.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited about Sora, although I'm really curious how they got their videos. I don't think they're going to tell us how they got all that content.
Right?
Let's see. How can we balance the pursuit of technological advancement with AI and the need to preserve human dignity and ethical standards?
Really good question as well. Because, like I said, it's a tool. So it'll multiply whatever advancement we want to create, whatever advancement we want to move towards, basically. So I think that it's just that. It'll be that. On the ethical side, it's a little bit of a very, very delicate dance to do, because so many cultures are now digitized. So many cultures are not. No. For our cultures, actually, that's actually okay. Marrying a kid at 13 years old, that's actually part of our culture. Or like one culture saying, like, oh no, you have to preserve a kid's. We don't get actually married here until like we're 30. It's gonna be the same thing where. It's funny because I was thinking about this the other day. I was telling a friend about this, of like we're reaching more and more of the Babylon of why God smited and changed our language basically to different languages.
Dude, yes, especially if we start cussing, if we start messing with like biology and just genes and things, and people are doing that at home, that's literally fall of humanity type of.
Yeah, so
that's when things get out of hand.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I was like I said, I was literally just thinking like, randomly, like, this happens again, basically. Of like, we kind of now have the same language. We kind of now our cultures are opening up to the point where everyone's sharing, this works with our culture, this doesn't work with our culture, blah 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 blah. So on the ethics side of things, that will have to evolve as well, of like what is acceptable and what isn't. And luckily we have science, we have psychology, we have studies of what actually is acceptable and what isn't, like brain development and like taking care of people, like what actually benefits humanity moving forward. But there is that fear, not really fear, but there was that thought in my head the other day of like, what if we just turned it to Babylon again? And like being smited just because we were trying to reach heaven because we had the same Yeah. So that's kind of where my brain was at.
It does make me wonder if there are like parallels with artificial intelligence and maybe like aliens or something, UFO stuff, because would that not be a pretty good example of like surpassed intelligence where we're like, hey, we're more open to being visited now that we're okay with something being smarter than us in a sense? And maybe outerworldly things are AI, who knows, right?
That's a really good concept. Um, I it's funny because I had this thought when I was like 17 and freaked a lot of my friends out. So I never said it out loud again until I've been saying it out loud now that I'm older, because it seems less crazy. Of There's always going to be things that we don't know. And like the world, I remember having this conversation with my friends, and I'm like, the world is so scary. And they're like, why? I'm like, because there's so many combinations of things that we would never think of, but it's actually okay with other people. Like the concept of aliens, I've always like in my head, I was like, it's impossible for us to be the only thing in the world, in the universe at least. Like in the world itself, like in our Earth, it's impossible that it's only humans. There's probably other things that we don't even know, we don't even see.
Yeah.
Like the world is, I think humans in general are evolving to accept more of the impossible. I think that's the shift. I think that's the change of like from, the 17-year-old Leann who said that to her friends and they're like, what are you talking about? Versus like now I'm talking about it. People are like, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It's that shift over that consciousness evolution of people kind of opening their eyes and like, oh, that is possible. Yeah, we can do that. So it's definitely just that shift.
Have you come across actual information that you're like, you know what? I'd rather not know. Like you could advance your knowledge in some way.
A lot. My business partner is this huge, I would call him information nerd. So he comes across the weirdest things and he'd tell me, and I'm like, next time I'm gonna ask you, you've asked me if I want this information in my head or not. So
Wow.
I've deleted some of the information he's given me just because sometimes it freaks me out too much. But like I said, there's so many combinations, so many possibilities that I think it's just now that we're starting to be open about it. Not even just accepting it, it's just us being open about it.
Have you ever had any experiences, seen things, anything crazy as a kid? Nothing?
Um, Probably buried
Questionable?
it somewhere in my psyche and detached myself from it. The biggest one that I've had for most of my life, to be honest, is being, and this will sound weird, but since you're asking the question, being susceptible to otherworldly energies, I guess is the best word. Like I'm not sure if is it a Western thing? We have a concept here in the Philippines called the third eye, where it's kind of like, Doctor Strange, like third eye thing, where you see
Yeah, for
beyond
sure.
the physical realm. And I don't have a third eye, but I've met people who've had third eyes who would feel or literally legitly see something that I won't ever see. For me, I feel it. I feel getting a little bit chills right now. I would feel when something is here that I don't see. And I have sage beside me. I have things that I've conducted really different rituals to get it out of. But like that for me still freaks me out of like the fact that I can't see, but I know 100% that something is there. Those are the kinds that I think those are the ones that I've let myself accept. But there's so many things that I've opened myself up to that I have not accepted, that I've kind of pushed down at the back of my head. I'm like, no, it doesn't exist. Never mind. Just deny. Like I'm trying to
Yeah,
remember that one that my friend said. I've forgotten all about it because I was too scared to accept it.
yeah, I've definitely been on that one's probably one where I've felt in some way something's trying to communicate or talk, and then you're like, there has to be like some universal laws that are preventing this, or like
Mm,
for whatever reason, there has to be reasons things can't cross for whatever.
yeah.
But I think it's beyond just like the spectrum of sight for sure. And I like how you worded that you can definitely feel things, right? Like it's not just perception or your
Hmm.
intuition. You're like, hold up, the whole air just changed around me or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Do you want to talk about your books a little bit? I don't
not
know
really
which
my
ones
old
you want to
books.
jump into.
Not really my old books, just the one that I'm.
Exploration of
Mhm.
exploration of love and relationships. I'm thinking Sweet Addictions, and then there's Of Just the Two of Us, Of Letting Go,
Yeah,
Of Things Left Unsaid.
those are cringe 16, 17, 18-year-old Leann writing a lot of those
I
things.
love it because
So
this would be like someone asking me, like, let me hear your music when you first started making music. I'd be like, you don't want to. It's all right.
fine. It's fine.
Then you're like, but my new stuff, everything
My
I'm
my,
working
my
on right
YouTube channel
now.
though. Yeah.
Have you thought of writing anything that's like related to your current industry?
Yeah, that's the book that I'm writing right now. Basically breaking down. I basically turned the video course that we did, into a book. And that's what I'm right now. Literally, I'm writing the chapter on virtual assistants versus AI. That's what I was writing as well, and hopefully I'll finish that this year. It's been 3 years in the making. It's been annoying the back of my head that I can't finish that book. But yeah, that's currently what I'm working on.
Weird. I was thinking that would be even easier with AI to finish. You don't think so?
Um, it's because I do what I say. Like, I treat it as a first draft. Whatever I come up with ChatGPT or whatever AI, I still rewrite it. I still make it my own. I still add case studies and stories from what I've actually experienced versus what ChatGPT can make from me.
It's interesting. I don't know if you've noticed, but I can definitely tell when certain media companies are writing headlines with AI, or just like, you didn't take the word beacon out. You didn't think about
Mm,
the basic things
empowering.
that all AI.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
No,
I
I get
love
you.
it. But these are the small nuances of, you can't understand it unless you're in it, in a sense.
Well, also later
Um,
on, that'll be the norm. That's the thing. It, then it wouldn't be weird to us. It's weird to us now because it's pretty new. But later on, we're like, oh no, that's usually how you do copywriting. Yeah, sure. So yeah.
yeah, and then what's also crazy is, I don't know if you can relate on the side of the world over there, but Western society is all worried because a lot of our adoption with AI has really caused like less and less literate kids and reading in
Mm,
general. So
mm-hmm,
like, so imagine putting these kids on the spot with the tests, and they're like, we don't even know how to read what we're writing, or they don't even know how to correct certain things
mm-hmm.
in AI. They're just going with the first draft, like you're saying.
Yeah,
But it's also can be used to stunt our growth in a sense, I
oh
guess, is
yeah,
what I'm getting at.
yeah, yeah. Using it as a
Have you
clutch.
have you noticed that though?
Here, not as much, mostly because I think culture wise, well, one, it's still new. Like, we're still, it's mostly to be honest, it's mostly people who have worked with Westerners who are starting to adopt ChatGPT. Um, like for us, like, we were for a little first because everyone else, all of our clients were talking about ChatGPT. But for others, like, I live in an area where there's a lot of call centers and outsourcing agencies as well, who might, but not all. Like, the day to day, like, for my siblings or even for my dad who runs our family cafe, um, it's still kind of the same way that as it always is. Like, I use ChatGPT for them basically as well. So it's not so loud here. I know it's really loud there. But here it's still something where people aren't really fully even grasping what it means.
I also have another question. I'm curious your perspective on this. So I'm working with the country in Africa, Tanzania, and one of the things that I thought about was, I was like, this is just hypothetical. I was like, if I ever went over there and I wanted to teach them and I wanted to show them artificial intelligence and things like this, one of the things that would set us back actually is the fact that GPT-4 is a subscription. So I was like, dang, like the most intelligent, expensive of the technology could not be widely available to all of these people, even if they do have phones. But then
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, okay, what if it was though? Like, let's pretend for a second you have a third world country and everyone's empowered with this really intelligent technology. Are we going to see people like literally moving the earth because now they understand minerals in the soil and how to build things out of nothing? Like, because I do see
Mm-hmm.
AI leading us to a world where everything's cheaper, more efficient. Now we can be self-sustaining, things like
Mm-hmm.
that. Curious your thoughts on that.
I always saw it as like it's a way to, like I said, Babylon. It's a way to flatten a lot of the things that would have been really hard to do 2 years ago, like what you're talking about, like minerals, like how to farm, how to start a farming business, how to, what are the best ways to do X, Y, and Z. We get the
Everything.
we get the best practices nowadays just because we have AI giving us what those best practices are. And by the way, I do have to go in a little bit. By the way, I'm just letting you know. I'm
No, for sure. That's my last question. That's my last question.
Just waiting. So on that, yeah, that's a really good, and I like that you gave a really specific example to third world countries, because in my head, when I was selling basically to the point where when the AI was telling you like, no, that means that you don't need to have your EA be someone who has perfect English because AI will write it for them. It like I said, it flattens a lot of the normal things that people would be wary about or not have any knowledge how to do at all, because AI is just in their pocket. I won't doubt that soon it'll be connected to our like on my Apple Watch. I can just bring up ChatGPT, or when Apple takes out their AI, I could just speak to it right there. I don't even have to bring anything with me. I think
it sounds
still that,
like
yeah. Mm-hmm.
It sounds like what you're saying is it'll level the intelligence playing field. So then it also questions, well, laziness is no excuse at that point.
Exactly.
Like everyone can find anything out.
It evens the
That's a really
playing
good
ground to that point, where it's now going to be up to your moxie. It's going to be up to your ethic, work ethic, basically, of how much do you want this versus the next kid who also had the same technology and has been burning the midnight oil trying to get this done. So yeah.
Super good way to end it. I love it. What does it mean to be more than rich to you? On that note, that's the name of the podcast.
I love that name, by the way. When I saw that, what it means to be more than rich is being abundant. Is like knowing that nothing is a competition. Like you could literally be in the same industry, in the same, like talking to the same clients with a person, but you are bringing in something different than the other person. And it's important to keep that in mind. Like
adding value.
Exactly. And we'll never really run out of luck, or never really run out of opportunities or resources. We'll run out of physical resources, but other resources in the world are always available to us. So being more than rich is knowing that abundance is everywhere.
Awesome. Learned a lot again, and this was really insightful.
Yeah, this is really good.
Did not expect to get so much out of the AI part, so I appreciate you taking the time on that.
You asked a lot of questions I've not been asked before, so that was really good.
I love it. I appreciate you. Thank you. I'm sure we'll be in touch soon.
Thanks, Joe.